Okay, let's dive right in. Thank you for the introduction. So, so what I worked on here was, or what I wanted to go through with you today is a particular problem that people typically have in playing fantasy Premier League. I believe I've worked or built the groundwork for a great solution to solving this problem. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I did that and showcase a demo at the end, just to wrap it up. And finally, we'll go through some conclusions and future work items to take this up to the next level. So let's start by talking about our average FPL player. So here we have a dad trying to quickly pick his fantasy team for the weekend on his phone. And you can plainly see here, he's got lots of other responsibilities he's juggling, and FPL just needs to fit in around those responsibilities. And yes, they don't all have 3 kids or even any kids for that matter necessarily, and this is probably just more reflective of my current reality than the true average FPL player. But what this does convey is that FPL players have something in common beyond their love for FPL, and that's other responsibilities, other hobbies that they have to fit FPL around. So in other words, FPL players don't have enough time. So the FPL problem is really just we don't have enough time to be competitive at FPL, or a lot of FPL players do not. And so, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Apologies. That wasn't quite the transition I was hoping for. Keep going. So why do they even need time? There's many different strategic decisions that go into any given game week for Fantasy Premier League, as you probably expect. So which players do you want to pick? Are you picking for the short term? Are you picking for the long term? Many dynamics there. And the inputs to those decisions, as you'd expect, are diverse and they're plentiful and they're constantly changing. So as you'd expect, information can come from social media, expert analysis websites, podcasts, the official websites, predictive sources, so on and so forth. And they're constantly changing because player statuses are constantly changing. Who's injured? Who's not injured? Who do we expect to play this weekend given the matchups? Who's going to be benched? What's rumor? What's fact? Yeah, it's all possible. So apologies. So why is this even a problem that anyone should care about? Because players generally have incentives to want to win. So for many, that's simply bragging rights, but for many others, that's cash incentives, or even just the fear of losing, or some combination of all of those. And so for myself, for example, I dropped out because I knew that I didn't have enough time to be competitive some years ago now. But what if there was an app that could help close the competitiveness gap between players of all types in the league? What is the easier way? What would such an app look like? It would allow users to get answers to their specific questions with reliable and up-to-date information exactly when they need it. And it would represent a single source of truth for that player, consolidating those diverse data sources into coherent answers that would drive decision making. And so how would any given FPL player know that this app has added value to their lives? Well, one, qualitatively, it would lower anxiety. There would be fewer late Friday nights, tossing and turning at 1 a.m., hoping you made the right decision about the trade you made at the last second. More time for the other things you love, just like this dad playing with his kids, and more enjoyment of FPL itself. And quantitatively, you would start seeing your average point total every week heading in the right direction. So let's talk a bit about MatchDayAI then. So first we got to talk about data because you can't everything starts with data. So first of all, our data is coming from our structured data is coming from the Fantasy Premier League app or website. I apologize, or API. I apologize. And this data is essential for data-driven decision making. It can easily highlight, for example, which players are dramatically overperforming their price tag. And to make this data really useful, we also take the categorical data out, pass it through an embedding model and into a vector store, and I'll explain why we do that in a minute. And on top of that, as you'd expect, we pass in some unstructured data. For now, I've just picked one expert analysis website and and a research paper on winning strategies for FPL, and pass those through the same embedding model and into a vector store as well. And so there's a couple of patterns I'd love to walk through really quickly that are leveraged here. One of them is just the basic retrieval augmented generation, which you're all quite familiar with, I'm sure. But in case you're not, it basically just gives us our model, our LLM, basically its own personal librarian who is an absolute expert and can take a user question, quickly find the relevant resources from the library, pass them to our model so that it has the context it needs to provide an effective answer. The only difference here is that our librarian is replaced with LangChain, an embedding model, and a vector store. And another pattern we're applying here is a state machine for SQL RAG. In this case, I just wanted to highlight what does this really mean? It means we give our LLM access to a suite of tools which it can leverage in order to derive the final answer. And it has an intimate understanding of what these tools can achieve, and it can call those in any order, potentially multiple times if it needs to. And the few tools I did want to highlight here was the out-of-the-box LangChain SQL database toolkit, which is really the bare minimum for any kind of SQL agent. And it gives the agent the ability to query the database schema, validate its queries that it's generating, and also run those queries. I also added another tool, which I'm just calling the noun lookup tool, which is this tool is one that just relaxes the need for the user to know exactly how to spell everything in our database, because that really takes away the usability of any chatbot if the user really needs to know how to spell every player name exactly right in order to query on that player, for example. And we also have the human as a tool here, which just allows our agent to ask clarifying questions of the human, just like you would in a typical user interaction. If a typical human interaction, you always have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions. And so what makes this a state machine? I'm taking up too much time here, actually. I'm going to move on to the next slide. And so let's jump over to the demo. So what we can see here is our Chainlit interface, and I'm just going to pass a few questions to it to showcase some of those tools and features that I mentioned earlier. So this is the SQL agent that's running in the background. I've asked the question, how many goals has Mohamed and Darwin Nunez scored? As you can imagine, there are multiple Mohammeds. So those tools that I was talking about earlier, it gives us the opportunity to clarify with our app which players we're actually talking about. So I'm talking about Salah and I'm talking about Darwin. Much more natural interaction than if you didn't have those additional tools. So we can see Salah scored more goals. And similarly, I'm going to jump over to that simpler RAG chain for our unstructured data now, and just ask some basic questions there as well. So for all of you who have not played Fantasy Premier League, I'm just going to give you a few concise tips for newcomers on how to succeed in FPL. And if you're interested, we can provide the source information as well. So we have our source links there as well, some good tips on how to succeed. And also we have our Fantasy Scout, who is providing us game week relevant information about which teams you should be thinking about investing in this week. And as you can see, Chelsea and Tottenham both have favorable matchups for this week. And I can ask a question like, if I have 10 million pounds to spend on a striker, who should I pick up this week? And just more specific questions. Apologies, this did not quite work the way I was hoping. It was supposed to have some input. It was supposed to have some specific player suggestions. But anyway, a fix for me to follow up on. So I'll jump back to the slides here. Bear with me. So just wrapping up, I know I'm low on time here. So conclusions and future work. So in terms of conclusions, text-to-SQL apps can be user-friendly. This was something that wasn't completely confident about when I started this, but with these basic enhancements, we can make them user-friendly. State machines add a lot of horsepower, gives our model, in this case GPT-4, the opportunity to essentially self-reflect on its queries or adjust its queries based on any failures it comes across. I'll be to be honest with regards to this app, it was more of a learning the back end and some learning more about some of the advanced techniques we can apply for this app, as opposed to an opportunity for me to build something that I plan to work on in the future. But I think it was a great app for that. If someone did want to pick it up and carry it forward in the future, I think there is opportunity there. I know people who would use this tool. There's a lot more I wish I could have done with this if I had more time, as you can see from this list. But essentially, future work includes getting more data and automating those pipelines for ingestion, and that's probably one of the biggest parts of this project. Evaluation framework, putting that in place so that we can iteratively make iterative and data-driven enhancements to this app. Improving the visibility and observability, leveraging open source models and fine-tuning, unifying structured and unstructured RAG. So you saw I had those kind of two personas there, but just merge it. There's no reason they need to be separate, just merging those two and routing accordingly. And then realistically, there would need to be some data visualization layer here as well for this tool to be useful. I think I'm at time here. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Yes. So we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for the presentation. Super awesome. Round of applause for Simon.